Hey, this is Mike Wright, and you're listening to my chapter of As the Story Grows.
Welcome to the next chapter of As the Story Grows. I'm Brian Patton. This week, I'm excited to welcome Ironside and Fighting Jacks guitarist Mike Wright to the show. Mike was also the guitarist in Bettie Rocket Records band Freeto Boat. Mike and I chat about the Bettie Rocket scene, Tooth and Nail's in-between era, getting lost on the roster, and his new project, Ironside. It was great reaching out to Mike and getting to hear about his background and musical history. I knew all the various pieces he'd been involved in, but not that there was a constant running through all the bands. I wanted to thank everyone who continues to support the show on Patreon. It means a lot to me, and I promise I'm working on some cool content coming soon for Patreon members. If you enjoyed this week's episode, tell someone else who might like it. Give us a rating and review on iTunes. Help us spread the word. All right, enjoy this week's chat with Mike Wright. You sent me down a rabbit trail last night when you told me you were in Freeto Boat, and I just went on a deep dive through Bettie Rocket bands after that.
Yeah, dude, it's been a long time. That was a while ago, but it was cool. It was a cool era. Did you know those bands, the Bettie Rocket bands back in the day?
Oh yeah, I owned Hindsight 2020 at one point, and yeah, Sick of Change and Noggin Toboggan, Watashi wa, Bike David. I was into all those bands. Yeah,
we were like one of the first bands. I think we were the first or second band on the label. The owner, Philip Fonretta, was he was starting a label, and he met us, and we were at 17, maybe 18. I don't even know if we were 18. We were all like 16, 17, and just didn't even know like what we were doing. You know, we were just like, this is fun, let's be a band. And we kept finding random kids from like our youth group and stuff that we knew, like, oh, you play an instrument, you can play in our band too. I think we had like 9 people at one point.
Oh my gosh. That's amazing. So where did you grow up?
I grew up in the Bay Area, in San Jose, California. It's like the Silicon Valley area. It's like about an hour south of San Francisco and Oakland. Definitely pretty suburban, pretty mellow. Like, it's pretty crazy there now, but it was like pretty mellow growing up. Just like normal suburbs and kind of like semi-quiet city.
That's cool. What got you into music?
I mean, when I was really young, like my parents weren't into music at all, and not really. My parents would like sing in the church choir and stuff, but there was not like tons of music on in the house or anything like that. It was like when I got to, I would have like, I think I had a couple Petra tapes of like Stephen Curtis Chapman, that kind of stuff. And eventually I was really into like early 90s hip hop and rap as an early teenager, and there was like an era where a bunch of new alternative rock or grunge stuff came out, like 1991, 92, and got super into it from that. And then we kind of moved to like punk and hardcore like a year or two later. So it was, one of the first memories I have of that was like there was a local radio station that would play Christian rock music, like 1 or 2, I think it was like 2 hours a week on this special show. And I just happened to randomly turn the radio on at night one night, and think the first two songs I heard was like a Starflyer song from off of Silver, and then MXPX, and I was just like, what is this? This is amazing. So it was those were like kind of my jumping off point. That was like at the same time as like, you know, Nirvana and Green Day and all those bands were coming out. So definitely made a big impact on me. I was, you know, I knew I wanted to play guitar like right off the bat. So I just like, you know, borrowed my dad's acoustic guitar and then eventually kind of saved up and bought some cheap gear and just like, you know, would play like Nirvana songs for like 8 hours a day. So
that's awesome. Was it just the sound of the guitar that drew you to it, or that image of like Kurt Cobain?
No, I don't even know. I think it was just like the sound of the guitar. It was like, it just seemed, I knew when I was really young, I was like, I don't know anything about playing music. I wasn't really like, inspired by like church music that I grew up singing. I was just like, I don't know if I want to sing or anything. But then when I heard some, you know, big guitar songs, I was like, wow, that's really what I want to do. I think it was, I remember going to like a Guitar Center when I was like 13, and I think somebody was like playing Nirvana on the guitar. You know, like Guitar Center, it's just like people just play the same crap over and over again.
Yeah.
It's either like Enter Sandman or Nirvana or something. And I remember hearing like someone playing like Smells Like Teen Spirit, and I was like, wow, it would be amazing to someday be able to play, you know, something like that on my own. That'd be so cool. But so yeah, so just and then the early I think it was Smashing Pumpkins and Starflyer were like the main ones that really got me into wanting to play guitar. It was like those big, huge, fuzzy chords and that real kind of spacey sound. That was like, wow, that's super inspiring, and I wanted to learn as much as I could.
Roughly, what age was this?
It's when I was like, I think about 13, probably 14, so like the early 90s. It was pretty much like right when Tooth and Nail started, right when the jumping point of like Christian alternative, like that was alternative that I liked, at least.
That's cool. When did you start playing in bands?
Not till I think we started Freeto Boat. That was my first band. It was about 1997, I think. We a couple guys. I met the bassist Corey at this like Christian camp, and we didn't know each other before then, but we realized we lived like in the same town, and I had been talking to my friend from church that played drums, and they were like, hey, we should start a band. And I think that the consensus was that everybody kind of liked ska music and like punk rock. And so like, all right, well, let's try to be a ska band. We don't really know. We had heard like, I think we heard like Supertones and No Doubt and like No Effects or something, and that was all we had heard at the time. You know, we were just so young. We didn't really know like what genres were necessarily. We were just like, this is awesome. Let's try to do it. And so we had like a couple of friends, different horns, or we had like two different guys that would sing and trade off, and it was just kind of ridiculous. But we started. There was no venues or anything that we knew about. There was no Christian bands or anything that we knew. So we decided to like put on our own shows at our youth group building for a while. So that was kind of the jumping off point. There've been more and more bands, like our kids that we knew were starting bands, and they're like, hey, let's do this. It seems like fun. And then eventually we met Philip Von Retta, the guy that started Bettie Rocket Records, came to us and was like, I'm starting a record label. And we were just like, wow, this is so crazy. So we started with a label. We would play like regional shows, like we would travel all around. and play different shows. And I think one of the first shows that we played on, it wasn't really a tour, but it was like a couple hours out of the way. It was down in San Luis, and it was with Noggin Toboggan. And so those guys became our close friends right off the bat. And I think they were like the second or third band on Bettie Rocket too. So it was like a pretty small group of guys. And we'd always play, the closest cities to play were like Sacramento or Stockton or San Luis. So that's how we got in touch with like, the Like David guys and English Unsaid. And, we would go down to LA and we played the Sick of Change and a bunch of those guys. So it kind of became like, it was like the different bands that we would play with and become friends for the next couple bands that would be on Bettie Rocket, and then it kind of just kept growing. There was a show that I remember we played when the Bettie Rocket owner wanted to see English Unsaid, and so he set up a show, and it was we were the opener. So it was Freeto Boat, and then English Unsaid, and then Training for Utopia.
Oh my God.
The weirdest opening band slot, like a kind of a goofy ska band, opening for those guys. Yeah, I mean, we always kind of tried to, I think we were all into like hardcore bands, and so we always tried to throw these kind of like weird hardcore breakdowns into our like pop punk ska songs, but it was definitely a pretty weird match.
Where did that name Freeto Boat come from?
We were just trying to think of like goofy names. I mean, we were so young, and we were into, there was some other local ska bands in the Bay Area that kind of had like some funny names, and like there was a band that we were really into called the Voodoo Glow Skulls, and it seemed like there was a lot of things that were kind of goofy, that came out of like kind of goofy stuff, and so we were like, someone said something about a Freeto Boat or a Frito Pie, and we just thought that was funny. I don't know where we came up with it. It was definitely regretful later on. As the band got a little more, as we got older and we started trying to write, songs that we were a little more serious about, it was kind of like a regret that we had such a goofy name. But, whatever, we were young, and, you live and you learn,
What led to you guys dropping the ska sound with the End of the Beginning?
We were, we had played, we had been on tour in 1999 for most of the summer and fall, and we played at Cornerstone, and we just played all over, and we were like, all these bands that we saw, we were just way more influenced by, a lot of that like 90s skate punk or musical punk stuff on Fat Records. I think we saw at Cornerstone there was Comeback Kid was brand new. I think they played there, and then also we saw Hope's Fall, and we saw like all these bands, Stretch Armstrong, and all these bands that we were just like super pumped on. And at the end of our tour, the horn players in the band were like, one of the guys was going to go off to college and he was going to quit, and the other guys were just kind of over it, and we were kind of tired of the ska thing in general, so we didn't have to kick anybody out. It was kind of like, hey, we're not really feeling the ska thing, and everyone's like, that's fine, we're going to do other things. And so we just went full on into that punk thing and just tried to do, we wrote a whole new record, and we're just super into it. And we were trying to go full time. We toured like West Coast for like a year on that new record and did a full U.S. tour. And then at the end of that, a couple guys were just like going to go off to college, and so it wasn't like there was no bad blood when we broke up or anything. We just decided like, hey, we're just going to try some different things. Or a couple people weren't into it, so it was kind of dissolved.
What was being on Bettie Rocket like? Because it was kind of a label in the shadow of Tooth and Nail. I know a lot of those bands. Watashiwa, Eager Seas ended up on Tooth and Nail. Fighting Jacks, which was not really a side project, but had a lot of similar members to Freeto Boat, ended up on Tooth and Nail. Kind of in this new label in the shadow of Tooth and Nail. What was it like being on Bettie Rocket at the time? Was it just new and exciting to be part of the scene, or?
Yeah, it was. At first, we didn't really know. It seemed like Tooth and Nail was kind of. It seemed like a bigger label than something we'd ever be on. And then just knowing like the owner lived locally near where we lived, and was like, pretty involved in like bands within California, and was really willing to like take a chance on people, and like was wanting to sign a lot of the bands that we were friends with. So we definitely like there definitely wasn't the budget, there wasn't the budget for recordings or for album artwork or anything like that, like Tooth and Nail had, but we had like a really good family vibe with the label and with the other bands, so it was really fun. We never were like sad about it. I think we probably had a better feel, there was not a lot of pressure, on selling records, or like, there wasn't like a lot of stress or pressure from anybody with the label at all. It was just like, be a good band, we'll do our best to put your record out. So I know that there was like there was a few other labels that we knew bands from that were kind of on the same level as Bettie Rocket at the time. I think like Bulletproof and maybe one or two other labels that we knew a lot of bands from. So we kind of were like the lower on the totem pole than Tooth and Nail, but it didn't really bother us.
Welcome to the classroom every day, where you can learn how to be a slave. Silence your integrity, decrease your mentality, will be okay. God left off these days, criminal.
So Fighting Jacks, it featured Corey, it featured you and Mike. How'd that project come together?
Well, that was when it was actually Casey, the original guys. All of us were from Freeto Boat. Casey, the singer of Fighting Jacks, he originally had played guitar like in the very early stages of Freeto Boat, and he's Corey's older brother. And then the drummer, Mike Hoppy, that was the drummer for Freeto Boat. He also was the first drummer for Fighting Jacks. So we had, when we broke up with Freeto Boat, we were kind of just like Corey and I were the ones that wanted to keep going with Freeto Boat, and we were going to actually change our band name to Call of Elijah. We had been like writing a bunch of new stuff that was definitely closer to, along the lines of like a Comeback Kid or Vice or something. It was definitely a lot more in the hardcore punk vein. And when the other guys didn't want to keep going with the band, we were like, we got to do something. And we knew that Corey's brother Casey had been writing some songs, and started jamming, and we were like, all right, let's try to do something different. It was definitely a different vibe than what we had been going with Freeto Boat, and we were pretty excited about it. There was a lot of new music that we had been really into that year. There's a lot of it's like at the 20th anniversary right now. Like I think it's like the soundtrack for our summer tour in our van is like Deftones, White Pony, and At the Drive-In, and Jimmy Eat World Clarity, and there was Sunny Day Real Estate had just put a new record out that year, and then I think there was like a Face to Face. Face to Face is one of our favorite bands too, and they put out this record called Ignorance is Bliss, which is like totally like an awesome rock record that stepped away from that pop punk sound that they had, and then most of their fan base hated it, and we were like really bummed about that because that was like so that was kind of like we really wanted to go in that direction. Like, we were huge fans of like the Foo Fighters and kind of more serious pop punk, more like Jawbreaker and Face to Face and some of those kind of bands that were really influential to us. So we started trying to like go in that direction, a little more dark, and like not just not a lot of humor, kind of like serious and straightforward, and kind of like as a reaction against what we were doing.
How'd you guys get connected with Tooth and Nail?
We've been playing, like, we hadn't done like a full U.S. tour or anything at that point. We were playing like all up and down the West Coast, down all the way to San Diego, all the way up to like Oregon, Seattle, or Portland, all through Oregon, and Washington a lot. And we were really good friends. We've been playing a lot with this band Ember, which went on to be, some of the guys from A Beautiful Mistake. And so I can't remember exactly when they switched from Ember to Beautiful Mistake, but we played a lot with them. And I got a call. We put out 2 EPs on our own. We're just touring. We were just trying to figure out what we wanted to do. And I got a call from Bill Power from Tooth and Nail, and he was like, "Hey, I talked to Josh from Beautiful Mistake, and he gave me your guys' EP, and I really dig it. Let's talk." So that was pretty sweet. We were stoked, especially because I knew Bill Power I was a big Blenderhead fan and Tooth and Nail fan since I was, 13 years old. So it was like, whoa, this is crazy. This guy is contacting us. And we went up and played up in Seattle and met Bill Power, and he was super stoked, and we just were like, this is amazing. This is going to be such an awesome experience if they want to sign us. And so we were just touring and keeping in touch with him, and then I guess a whole bunch of stuff went down at Tooth and Nail, and Bill ended up leaving, and we were like, are we still talking to Tooth and Nail? We didn't really know what was happening.
Oh man.
It was kind of weird. Yeah, we had already been talking and trying to figure out the plan with the label, and then he left, and we were already scheduled to go play. There was a festival called Tom Fest up in Oregon that Mikey Bridges would put on, and so we would play that every year. That was like in September of every year or something. We would play that every year, and we went up there and played, and then Chad and Brandon came to the fest that year and saw us play finally, and then talked to us about a deal. I think that was we were really good friends with Kashiwa, obviously, and then we were really good friends. They played a bunch of shows with the Death Campaign, which was the Officer Negative guys had a metal band that they were doing for a while. And I think all 3 of us played at Tom Fest that year, if I'm not mistaken. And Chad and Brandon were there to see all 3 of us. So after we played, they were like, "Hey, let's work out the deal. Let's do it." Did
the label hook you guys up with Sylvia Massey, or was that something you guys wanted to pursue?
Well, I think we had a management company at the time that was pretty sweet. They were actually from our town, and they, before we were a band or anything, definitely they had signed this band, the band Smash Mouth, which is like, they're from San Jose too. They're from our hometown. And, so they had signed Smash Mouth, and so they got really big as a management company, and they were working with us. And we originally had talked to some different labels, and we were talking to Tooth and Nail, and we were like, we really want to sign Tooth and Nail. And they were the ones that got in touch with Sylvia. I know that originally we were, Tooth and Nail wanted us to go and record with Aaron Sprinkle up in Seattle, but I think his studio wasn't ready yet, or maybe it was brand new. Because I know he did a ton of great records out of there, but it wasn't quite ready yet, or something was going on. And we said, hey, we heard about, Sylvia Massey had just moved and built a studio up in Weed, California, which is like up there at the top of California by Shasta, and had a new studio that was awesome. And so we checked it out, and it just worked out great. We were super happy to go up there. Spent a couple weeks up there in the winter. It was super snowy, and recorded the record. There was the studio had an apartment above there that we got to live in for a couple of weeks. It was amazing. It was awesome. Cool experiences with her, like, hearing a lot of stories of all the old bands she's recorded and working with Rick Rubin. It's a once in a lifetime experience.
What was Tooth and Nail Records like at that time? Because you guys, Amber Lynn's first record, Bleach is on the label. Your record came out right before Emery's debut, right before They're Only Chasing Safety. I mean, you were right at this pivot point before the label, like, not just being big in the Christian scene, but being big in the underground punk and emo scene. What was that moment like?
It was, in some ways it was amazing. In some ways it was not great for us either. It was weird because going into it seemed like, okay, we're going to get on to a lot of these tours. Our record's going to come out. It's going to be amazing. And what ended up happening was I know that there was a lot of people that worked at Tooth and Nail that left. There was a lot of they had signed a lot of bands at the same time. And, we were working with Chad Johnson, who's awesome. I mean, we love Chad Johnson. The whole time we were with him at Tooth and Nail, he was great. He was our A&R guy. But there was a lot of bands that were coming out at that time that were already a lot bigger than us. And, Chad was the A&R guy for Further Seems Forever and Under Oath and Anberlin and a lot of bands who were kind of like already bigger, already at a certain level. And so it was a little tricky for us to get, on to as many tours, as many things as we would have liked to. The music in general at the time was kind of weird too, because, that was like the explosion of like the screamo sound at the time. So everyone was, not necessarily heavier music than Fighting Jacks, but there was a lot more like that kind of like, people were really only into your band if you were, screaming all the time and had a lot of, kind of like that, it was really, really popular to flail around, and it was kind of that, the crazy live show. And then, at the same time, there was, like Watashi Wa was one of our great friends. There was a lot of bands like Copeland and Watashi Wa and bands coming out that were a lot softer too than we were, so we were kind of in the middle of, being a lot heavier of a rock band and having, like some riffs and having some, big choruses than those kind of softer, indie bands, but we weren't heavy enough at all for, the screamo and the stuff that was huge at the time too. So we were kind of in the, a little bit lost in the shuffle here and there. We ended up doing a lot more touring with with punk bands during that time. So that was awesome. We did a lot of touring with Dogwood, who were just amazing guys, took us out on a lot of different tours. And it was great. I mean, we would have liked to be on there longer. I think there was a lot of bands that got signed at the time that we did, and then a lot of bands just got dropped before we got to put out a next record. So, we didn't get I don't know if it was turnover at the label or if it was, just too many bands or what, but, before we even we were demoing a bunch of new songs and recording and touring and everything. And then we just got to know this, hey, we didn't even get a call. We just got to know this, that you're no longer on the label. It's oh, that sucks. That's weird.
Yeah.
So it was interesting. I mean, we had a pretty rough year. I think it was we had been touring. We got off a tour. We found out that we got dropped by tooth and nail, and then we did a couple more shows on the road, and we got back, and then our van and trailer got stolen. All of our gear got stolen. We were just wow, this has been a rough year. So it kind of set us back for a while. And at that point, people were starting to get married and just doing different things, and so it's kind of it wasn't the end of Jacks, but it kind of was definitely put an end for a while.
I know you've put out, Fighting Jacks put out a second full length, and you've done other projects since then, but there was a period of time there where, did you do anything between 2006 and 2014 or so musically?
Not really. I mean, we had been recording we started recording the Fighting Jacks second full length. We just recorded it ourselves with a friend of ours who has a studio in San Jose, and so we're slowly working on that. All the guys in the band were getting married. Our drummer David, he joined the band Sherwood. So he went on the road with those guys. He recorded all the stuff for the record, and then he went on the road with those guys, and then we were just kind of slowly working on it. It took a while to buy some gear, kind of get back on his feet after that had happened, and then we were, not really. I mean, what mostly was just, us doing our own things. I don't have any kids, but Casey had a couple kids. Corey got married, and then we didn't really have a drummer. We were jamming with a couple different guys, and then we would play a few shows here and there when Dave was off tour with Sherwood, and slowly working on a record. But it definitely took quite a few years of a break. I actually went back to school. I had, it was kind of weird, when you're on tour and doing music since you're 17 until you're 26 or 27, and you're just what am I doing with my life? You kind of have a little bit of a weird life crisis kind of thing going on. So, I went back to school. I actually started working as a chef for a few years. Went to culinary school and learned, how to run a restaurant, how to do a lot of catering, and was doing that full time for a few years, and and then we started doing music again. But it was actually, there's a lot of life transitions. We all had to find careers and figure out what we wanted to do outside of music. You had to change your identity from being, Mike Wright, the guitarist guy that's in bands as his job, to being a husband and having to find full-time work and have to figure out what you want to be, your career. It took a little while. It was definitely a tough transitional period.
Walls are crumbling, clouds are open.
Missing Decade on Bandcamp in 2017. Did you find that there were fans still interested in what you were doing who wanted to hear it, or reintroducing yourself to new people?
We definitely, there was definitely a good amount of people that were into it. The local scene in the Bay Area had changed a lot in 10 years. There wasn't, like, all the venues we used to play out were gone. A lot of the people that would go to shows were just either they're not into music anymore, or there wasn't really any kind of a scene that people went to or were part of anymore at the time. So it was a little different. You know, we finally put out the record. We put a lot of effort into putting out the record and making it sound as good as we could possibly make it. And so we played some shows, and we were just like, let's start doing this thing. And right after that, Corey was like, hey guys, I'm moving to France. He and his wife has family there, and he had a job opportunity to go to France and be a beer brewer for this company over there. And so he moved, and that was pretty much it. We decided, like, all right, we're not gonna, you know, try to fill the shoes of another guy. And, you know, Casey was working full time, I was working full time. It's just easier that way, is to kind of, like, instead of we started to try to put a lot of effort in, and just realized it's not something that's going to happen. So it's kind of like all she wrote as far as that goes. I mean, we still talk about putting out some new music. We have some new song ideas here and there, but it's tough with people's schedules and different, life commitments in that area.
Talk about Mercy High, which is a super cool EP.
Yeah. That was a band that a couple guys and I started in the San Jose area, and we just were playing locally, and our goal was just to be like the coolest local band to open up for different bands that came through San Jose or came through the Bay Area. And it was actually my friend Jaffa, who's, I know he's a longtime listener of the podcast. He's been in the scene a long time, and a couple other local guys that were like old music scene veterans from the San Jose and the Bay Area. And so we started playing around for a while. It just was tough. Every guy in the band was in multiple bands, and we were trying to kind of go for that. One of our big influences was Starflyer's older records. We were kind of going for that, like, Starflyer, shoegaze, heavy rock, kind of like fuzzy rock riff kind of thing. But, people were, the drummer we were playing with, Dave, he was in, like 4 other bands, and Jaffa was in a couple other bands, and Keith and I had started doing the Ironside band. I was working on those songs, and going down to the LA area, work on those tunes. And our bassist was in multiple bands too, and it was just crazy. So it was just really hard for us to, like, even get together to practice. And the guys were spreading out, moving. Our Joff moved up to Oakland, so that's like hour and a half from San Jose, and it was just tough. So we never really broke up. It was just like, hey, nobody could ever figure out a good time to get together to do it. So definitely, yeah. I definitely wanted to. We definitely had a lot of songs that that were ready to put out for that band. We just didn't see fruition on that one, unfortunately. But at the time, I was like already. My main goal was like already, doing the Ironside stuff. That was my baby that I started on my own. It's like every band that I been in. I always kind of wished it was like heavier and had a little more metal influence and a little more like a riffy influence. And so I just started like, if I can't get the full band of guys together, I'm just gonna, start writing, recording songs on my own, write all the parts, and try to figure out sound. My good friend Dave Mass, he was formerly from the band EchoCast and from Redline, so he's in a couple bands like from since the mid '90s, and they were like the band that Fighting Jacks toured with a lot. That was our closest friend band, and we had like a really strong kinship in metal music. So Dave and I were always like every compared to the other guys in our bands, we always liked metal bands, more than they did, and we were always just talking about metal and like our love for like Pantera and Machine Head and all these like bands that no one in our bands were into at all. So we would still keep in touch, like even though he lived down in LA and I lived in the Bay Area. We'd go down and hang out. Our wives were friends, and we'd just like hang out and talk about music. And we were always like, we should do a band, it's kind of like a joke. And we originally were like, let's do some kind of weird avant-garde metal band where, he would do like I would do a bunch of crazy, guitar things, and he would, do a bunch of noisy Mike Patton vocals over the top or something. And then when I actually started writing music and he started doing vocals for the songs, it was like, oh, this is actually like, a lot catchier and, and more, rock oriented than we originally thought it was going to be, but the way it goes.
What's the future of Ironside look like? I know everything got locked down and crazy this year, but what's the future? You guys have a few singles out right now.
Yeah, we have like we were finally putting our live band together. I know you talked to Neil a while back. Neil's playing guitar for us, and Neil Samoy used to be from Stave Baker and all those bands, and then. We have the guy that was doing our mixing. His name's Josh Newell, and he's actually a amazing metal producer and rock producer, and also a bassist. So he's been playing bass for us live. And Corey from Fighting Jacks actually played bass on the songs that we have out right now, but he's in France now, obviously. So we're kind of like a collective as a band as far as the recordings goes. We have the drummer that played on our record. His name's Miles McPherson. He's out in Nashville. He's an amazing studio drummer and one of our close friends. And then locally, our friend Jason, who's the former EchoCast drummer, is playing with us. And then we even played a show with Lance for Living Sacrifice last year because we didn't have our local guy couldn't do it, and we were just really good friends with him through different shows and different things, and he was like, I really want to play with you guys. So we're trying to figure out like who depending on where we play in the future, that it'll kind of depend on who plays live with us. And Dave and I worked on. Originally, he got an offer to work on this cruise called Motorhead's Motorboat, which is it was a metal cruise that was it was back in 2014, and it was leaving from Florida going to Mexico, and it was Motorhead and Anthrax played on it, and Testament and Down and Corrosion of Conformity, and all these different bands were playing on it. And that would totally kind of relit a fire in us to be a band again, and want to play live and really work on our craft, work on our singing and our playing, and try to be the best musicians that we could. And the next year, I think a year or two later, we worked on a cruise together, which is a Shiprock cruise, which is more mainstream metal and radio rock. And one of the bands was that they always would bring one random band on the cruise, and Living Sacrifice played on it. So we were crazy. So the whole week we just hung out with Bruce and Lance and the other guys in the band, and we're just pumped to meet these guys and actually get to know them, and so just kind of through working on these cruises and being at a place in our lives where we can actually work on music again and put a lot more time and effort into it, and actually put money into it too, not being broke, as a kid who's just getting off the tour, but just being an older person who's this is really what I want to do in my free time, and it's passionate, but it's not something I'm relying on. So it's been pretty sweet. We actually had a lot of stuff planned this year. We had a bunch of shows that we were going to play, and we had a bunch of new music to put out, and we were just kind of about to do all that, and then obviously the coronavirus and everything happened. So it's been a little different. It's actually been crazy though. It's actually been the most productive for me in music writing and recording than it's ever been in my life the last 3 months. So I've had so much time to work on music that I've just been writing tons of songs. We've been working on tons of new ideas, finishing up demos that we had, and so we have a whole nother EP. We have a couple songs from the original singles we put out. We have a song or two that we're gonna put out that's from those sessions, and we're gonna put the whole EP out as one thing. And then we actually have a whole new EP of music, and then also a whole EP of covers that we've been working on too. So a lot hopefully coming out, this year. Hopefully we can play again too, but you never know. But sooner than later, hopefully we can play the shows. But we definitely have a lot of music down the pipe that we're just finishing up. It's awesome to be in a place where music, you're not relying on music. I know during Fighting Jacks days, especially at the end of our time with Tooth and Nail, it became when it was, things became a job. So it was very stressful trying to make sure you sold albums, and you're always on the road, always trying to schmooze with bands so they could take you on the road or get on a show, and you have to try to sell albums. And there was a lot of pressure, and it's pretty awesome now coming from a different point in your life where you're just ready to just make music purely out of the love for music and the love for playing in band and the love for playing guitar, and just trying to challenge myself in my songwriting, and do strictly what I want to do with the music that I'm making. It's pretty awesome right now. I definitely would, sometimes wish I was on the road again or miss that lifestyle, but, having the freedom to make new music, with my best friends and, have it be exactly what I want it to be. It's pretty awesome. I wouldn't trade that at all. So yeah, so I'm pretty stoked. Hopefully, it's not the best year obviously for everybody, but hopefully it turns out to be a really good year for Ironside moving forward. Sure.
Thanks for listening to As the Story Grows. Our theme song was written and composed by the legendary Bob Nana. If you like what you hear, subscribe on iTunes and give the show a rating and review. If you'd like to support the show financially, click on the Patreon link at asthestorygrows.com. If you enjoyed this episode, share it on social media with your friends. Much appreciated, and thanks for listening.
I never felt so young